You don't become someone's placeholder the moment they stop choosing you. You become one the moment you convince yourself that if you love them well enough, wait long enough, or understand them deeply enough, they'll eventually choose you back. That's what makes this kind of heartbreak so difficult to recognize. It rarely begins with rejection. It begins with hope. Hope that next month will feel different. Hope that they're almost ready. Hope that once life becomes less chaotic, once they're less afraid, once they're finally certain of themselves, everything you've invested will suddenly make sense. Until one day you realize you've been waiting for a future that never actually began. For many bisexual people, this experience can feel painfully familiar. Not because bisexuality creates placeholder relationships, but because many grow up surrounded by questions they never asked for. They're told they're confused, that they'll eventually pick a side, that their feelings are temporary. Even when those ideas are completely false, hearing them over and over teaches the nervous system something dangerous. Uncertainty starts to feel normal. And when uncertainty feels normal, consistency can feel strangely unfamiliar. That's where the trap begins. Your nervous system doesn't automatically chase what's healthy. It chases what feels familiar. If you've spent years defending your identity, explaining yourself, or wondering whether other people will ever fully understand you, someone who sends mixed signals doesn't always feel unsafe. Sometimes they feel recognizable. That's why placeholder relationships rarely feel wrong in the beginning. They feel exciting. They remember tiny details about your life. They stay up talking until 2 in the morning. They tell you secrets they've never shared before. They call when everything falls apart. They text whenever they need comfort. Slowly, you become their emotional home. Without realizing it, you begin mistaking emotional access for emotional commitment. Because if someone trusts you with their deepest fears, surely they'll eventually trust you with their future. But those are two completely different choices. Here's the part nobody expects. Someone can make you feel incredibly important without ever intending to build a life with you. Modern relationships have blurred that distinction. People have become comfortable sharing vulnerability long before they're willing to offer commitment. They'll cry in front of you, confess childhood wounds, tell you they're terrified of losing you. Yet the moment you ask where the relationship is actually going, the conversation suddenly becomes too much. That's how placeholders quietly appear. You become emotionally essential without ever becoming emotionally secure. And your brain begins collecting evidence that commitment is just around the corner. A good morning message, an unexpected compliment, perfect weekend together, a long hug before saying goodbye. Each small moment feels like proof that everything is finally changing. But here's the cruel part. The relationship doesn't actually have to become healthier for your brain to believe it's improving. It only has to become better for a moment. Right after it hurts you. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. It's one of the strongest attachment mechanisms the human brain experiences. When affection arrives unpredictably, your brain works even harder to earn the next moment of closeness. Hope itself becomes rewarding. Every unexpected act of affection releases enough dopamine to convince you that this time will be different, even when the overall pattern never changes. That's why leaving feels so difficult. You're not only grieving the relationship you had, you're grieving the future you've spent months or sometimes years imagining. And that imagined future can become more emotionally powerful than reality itself. Slowly, your questions begin to change. Instead of asking, "Do I feel safe here?" you begin asking, "How can I make this work?" That single shift changes everything. Because now your energy isn't focused on understanding your own needs. It's focused on managing someone else's uncertainty. You explain away things that would have once hurt you. They've just been stressed. They've been hurt before. They're scared of commitment. They're still figuring themselves out. Every excuse sounds compassionate. Together, they become permission to ignore your own reality. For many bisexual people, this pattern carries another hidden weight. After years of hearing that your identity is temporary or uncertain, it's easy to internalize the idea that waiting is simply part of love. That if you're patient enough, accepting enough, understanding enough, eventually you'll be chosen completely. But relationships aren't supposed to feel like proving your worth. They're supposed to feel like sharing it. Reality asks questions that hope tries to avoid. Who reaches for you when life becomes difficult? Who creates clarity instead of confusion? Who makes room for you instead of asking you to wait? Who chooses you even when they don't have to? Those questions reveal something chemistry never can. Chemistry tells you two people can connect. Commitment tells you whether they're willing to protect that connection. Those aren't the same thing. Some people are incredibly skilled at creating intimacy. They're simply not willing or able to sustain it. They know how to make you feel seen for one unforgettable night. They don't know how to consistently show up the following morning. That's why placeholder relationships feel so addictive. The highs are intensely validating. The lows are painfully confusing. Your nervous system never gets permission to relax because it never knows which version of the relationship it's about to experience. One day they're affectionate. The next they're emotionally unavailable. One week you're making plans together. The next they've disappeared behind vague excuses. Eventually you become an expert at reading signals. You stare at your phone. They haven't replied in hours. You tell yourself they're probably busy. Then you see they've posted a photo online. Your stomach drops. Suddenly you're analyzing response times. Changes in punctuation. The number of emojis they used. Whether they viewed your story. Whether they sounded different during your last conversation. Feels like love. But it isn't. It's hypervigilance. Your brain has learned that emotional safety depends on predicting someone else's behavior before they disappoint you again. That's exhausting. And the tragedy is that many placeholders mistake this constant emotional effort for proof of how deeply they care. But love shouldn't feel like solving a mystery every single day. Healthy intimacy doesn't reward confusion. It replaces confusion with clarity. The hardest realization isn't discovering that someone never fully chose you. It's realizing how long you stopped choosing yourself. You stopped asking for reassurance because you didn't want to seem needy. You stopped expressing disappointment because you didn't want to push them away. You stopped asking where the relationship was going because you feared the answer would end it. Little by little, you made yourself smaller. Not because your needs weren't important, because keeping hope alive became more important than protecting your peace. That's how placeholders disappear. Not overnight. One compromise at a time. One excuse at a time. One unanswered question at a time. Until one question quietly changes everything. If nothing about this relationship ever changed, would you still choose it? That question pulls you away from fantasy and back into reality. Because reality doesn't care about promises. Cares about patterns. Patterns reveal priorities. And priorities reveal commitment. Someone who truly wants to build a future with you doesn't make consistency feel like a reward you have to earn. They don't keep you emotionally close while keeping the future permanently out of reach. Healthy love isn't built on uncertainty. It's built on mutual effort, mutual responsibility, mutual choice. No one should have to audition for a permanent place in someone's life after they've already given them their heart. Perhaps that's the darkest truth hidden beneath placeholder psychology. The greatest fear was never being abandoned. It was believing that being partially chosen was the closest you were ever allowed to come to being fully loved. But the moment that belief begins to collapse, something stronger quietly takes its place. Self-respect. And once you've experienced the calm certainty of someone who chooses you without hesitation, without games, without conditions, you realize something almost unbelievable. Peace was never boring. It only felt unfamiliar, because the healthiest relationships don't leave you wondering whether you're enough. They remind you that you never had to prove it in the first place.